Hi, folks. This is JC. I had put chapter 4 of a detective story on a video, and I uploaded it, I thought, into my video place on YouTube. Turns out it was too big to go on there. So what I've done is I'm going to do half of chapter 4, and then the second half of chapter 4. I'll have it chapter 4A and chapter 4B. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and start. This is chapter 4A. Back in Tulsa City, things had slowed down to normal. Everyone was back to doing what they always did, which wasn't much. Anne still wondered just what a detective third grade was supposed to do. She asked Tom Shelton when he was going to teach her what a detective was supposed to do, and he said he already had. He had left her to her own resources. That was the best thing he could do for her, he told her. Anne wondered if Tom also was at some kind of loss as to what the difference in being a uniform and a detective was. No, she told herself, he was too self-assured to not know what he should do as a detective. After a while, she, like Tom, just quit worrying about it. It had been a long day, mainly because not much had happened. Anne went to bed around 10 o'clock and at 2 o'clock was sleeping deeply when her phone rang. She didn't hear it for several rings, and when she did answer it, it sounded fuzzy with sleep. "Hello," she muttered. "Who is it?" "Anne," a familiar voice said tentatively. "This is Anne," she said, now fully awake. "Who is this?" "This is Sheriff Perkins, detective," the voice said. His voice sounded strangely strained, and Anne hesitated a second before she spoke again. "Sheriff Perkins, what's wrong? It's 2 o'clock in the morning. What's happened?" "I'm at the mayor's house, Anne. I need you to come on down here as soon as you can." "Sure, Sheriff. I'll be there in 15 minutes, said Anne. When Anne arrived at the mayor's house, several squad cars were already there, casting their whirling, multicolored lights on the surrounding area, almost like a carnival atmosphere. She stopped away from the house and walked up to the scene. Everyone was gathered around the car. Anne could see it was the mayor's Ford. The sheriff stopped her before she got to the car. "What's up, Sheriff?" Anne asked. "Is something wrong with the mayor?" "He's dead," said Sheriff Perkins. "Shot to death." Anne couldn't say anything for a second. She was stunned. "Have a look," the sheriff said. Anne approached the car and Charlie Ford and Billy Thompson stepped aside for her. She could see the mayor's figure drooped over the steering wheel, his arms hanging down on either side of the steering column. Billy was shining his flashlight on the figure of the mayor, and Anne could see blood on the windshield and the steering wheel. Anne stepped closer and could see in the light a small hole just behind and below the mayor's left ear. The bullet had gone through his head and exited out through the windshield in an upward angle. "I can't believe it," said Anne. "I can't believe it." She started to say what happened, but she checked herself. It was pretty obvious what had happened. Anne looked around the area. "Where's Tom?" she asked. Sheriff Perkins said, "He's coming. He was on his way to Cincinnati. I got him on his cell phone." "Who found the body?" asked Anne. Billy spoke up. "I did," he said. "I'm on tonight and was on my rounds and I saw the car just sitting here. At first I didn't think anything was wrong. Then I remembered the mayor always parks his Ford in his garage. He never leaves it on the street. When I turned around and drove back to the headlights, turned around and drove back, the headlights were in his windshield and I could see him hunched over the wheel. Then it was easy to see what had happened. I called the sheriff and I got out and looked things over. The window was already down. I didn't touch anything except to feel his neck for a pulse. I almost threw up. Lights were coming on in houses all along the street now. People were beginning to come out to see what was going on. Billy still looked pale. So Charlie Ford and Mel Vernon eased off in either direction to discourage people from coming too close to the crime scene. "Stay back, folks," said Charlie. "You don't want to step on any clues. Stay back of the tape." Mel did the same at the other end of the tape. They were very efficient at their jobs. Charlie Ford and Mel Vernon were good friends as well as good cops. They were both natives of Tulsa City, and they lived on the same street in houses that sat side by side. They had been friends all the way through school. They had even dated the Colson sisters for a while. Mel, barely out of his teens, married one of the sisters, but Charlie never married. The last fight he had was when some guy suggested that he was married to Mel. Charlie and Mel were always close and rarely disagreed on anything. Charlie liked Mel's wife, Lois, and she liked him. He was like a big brother to her, and he spent a lot of time at Mel's house. The coroner, who also had a medical practice in town, finished his investigation and took some pictures and told the sheriff he was through. He estimated the time of death to be around 2:00 a.m. It was now 6:00 a.m. The sheriff decided to keep the area taped off the rest of the day so he could have daylight to once again inspect the area. Ann, Billy, and Mel began knocking on doors and asking questions of the people who lived within a block of the crime scene. A lady who lived at the house next to the mayor's house said she might have heard something very early that morning. She said she awoke for just an instant but wasn't sure what woke her. She said she might have heard a loud noise. She said she thought it was a dream. She didn't know what time it was because she didn't fully waken. Tom Sheldon got there around 6:30 and was filled in on what had happened. He too began questioning the neighbors of the mayor. A man across the street told Tom that he saw a strange car very late, but he didn't think much about it and he couldn't remember what kind or color the car was. He said it was moving slowly along the street, and when he started to look more closely, the TV distracted him and he returned to the program. The program was Johnny Carson, so it must have been around 1:00. The mayor's body was taken away, and after it had been checked for fingerprints, the car was towed to the police station parking lot. The sheriff and his officers spent a couple more hours looking over the crime scene and asking questions, but they got no results. The rest of the day added no more clues to the case. The local paper put out an extra edition so it could feature the murder. The Tulla City Crier went to press at 7:00 and hit the streets at 10. B.J. Lassiter stood in front of his office and sold papers the old-fashioned way, shouting, "Read all about the murdered mayor, special edition, get it right here." He quickly sold out the 500 copies he had run, so he went in and ran 500 more. He was at his glory, just like the old days, he said with a grin. Back at the station, the sheriff and the rest discussed the murder. They tried to think of a reason that anyone would have to kill old man Rafton. No one could come up with one. The only thing the mayor had done of any importance in a year was the presentation ceremony for Ann. There had been nothing else of any importance that had happened at Tulla City for as long as any of them could remember. Tom suggested they might check to see if the mayor had made any trips out of town lately. After a few calls to various people who were close to the mayor, they decided he hadn't been out of town for quite some time. They ran out of questions to ask, and there were no answers. They were at a dead end. Mel said, "I hope the hell this doesn't take another 4 years to solve." "Yeah," said Billy, "there'd be no one to make a presentation for solving this one." Ann reddened slightly, but said nothing. Billy said, "The sheriff, you and Tom go on home and get some sleep. The rest of us will stay and see if anything turns up." An old Ford rolled quietly along Main Street. Driving it was a smallish young man. He was about as inconspicuous as anyone you would ever see. His name was Buck Purley. He worked at the local filling station, pumping gas and doing an occasional brake job or lube job. His full name was Buckley Earl Purley, but he liked Buck. He thought it sounded manly. Buck was about as inconspicuous as anyone could be. It was possible for him to attend a party or barbecue and not even be remembered as having been there. He was a loner, without friend or relative. He lived alone in a single room at a local rooming house. He had a hot plate, an electric coffee pot, and a microwave oven he used to cook and heat his food. Mostly, though, he ate at a fast food place. His room was neat and tidy, with nothing ever out of place. If anyone ever wondered when Buck came to town, they'd be hard-pressed to name a date. He just wandered in one day. He liked what he saw, and he stayed. He started working at the service station within a week of arriving. As a result of working at the station, he was somewhat acquainted with most of the people of driving age in town. Some he knew better than others. Detective Ann Barton he knew as well as he knew anyone. She came in regularly to gas up or to have her car serviced. The patrol cars also fueled at his station. Buck's favorite pastime was cruising around town in his car. Sometimes he would drive to other towns and just drive around looking at the sights. There was very little about the county Buck didn't know. He knew all of the city streets as well as all the county roads that branched off the highway. Buck was a veritable road atlas. He could give accurate directions to anywhere in the area if anyone ever asked him, but no one ever asked him. No one ever asked him anything except, "What do I owe you for the gas?" But Buck was satisfied with his place in life. He was a man who was happy and satisfied to stand by and watch the world do whatever the world wished to do. He had little to say to anyone about anything. Now, this concludes Chapter 4A, and I'll be putting Chapter 4B on here very shortly. I hope you enjoyed this part of it, and be sure to pick it up on Chapter 4B to finish this chapter. This is JC, and I'll see you down the road if the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise.